Hey, Internet, look what came. Prefaces. Martin Luther's preface. I put it right there. Prefaces to the books of the Bible. We published this guy a couple of weeks ago. My copies just came. Let's see if this can be adjusted. You can't see it. Copy just came the other day, and I was looking through it. If you want to get a copy of this thing, you can download it for free at wolfmueller.co. That's if you like to read books on your Kindle or your tablet or whatever, or also if you're super cheap. Or you can pick it up from Lulu for $6. But I was reading through Luther's preface on the New Testament, which was written in 1522, revised in 1545. And he's making this great argument, which is so important for us to hear. We normally think Old Testament law, New Testament gospel. And Luther says, no, look, the promises of God are there in the Old Testament as well as in the New. And he keys in on this promise, this passage from Romans 1, where Paul says, I'm separated to preach the gospel of Christ, which he promised before through his prophets in the Holy Scripture concerning his Son, who was born of the seed of David, etc. So Luther points out that Paul says that the gospel was promised in the Old Testament. And Luther is now going to take a page and a half, and he's going to run through some of these promises of the gospel in the Old Testament, which is great. I love this kind of stuff. There's passages like this in the Book of Concord, in other places in Luther as well, which shows this golden thread of the gospel running through the Old Testament. So I'm going to read this to you guys. To indicate some of these places, he gave the first promise when he said to the serpent in Genesis 3:15, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. He shall tread on thy head, and thou shalt sting his heel. Christ is the seed of the woman, Luther says, and he has trodden upon the devil's head, i.e. sin, death, hell, and all his power. For without this seed no man can escape sin, death, or hell. Again, in Genesis 2:18, he promised Abraham, through thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Christ is the seed of Abraham, says St. Paul in Galatians 3:16, and he has blessed all the world through the gospel. For where Christ is not, there is still the curse that fell upon Adam and his children when he had sinned, so that all of them together are guilty of sin, death, and hell, and must belong to them. Against this curse the gospel blesses all the world by the public announcement, he that believeth in the seed shall be blessed, that is, rid of sin and righteous, and shall remain alive and be saved forever, as Christ himself says in John 11:26, he that believeth in me shall never die. Again, he made the promise to David in 2 Samuel 7:12, when he said, I will raise up thy seed after thee, who shall build a house to my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. That is the kingdom of Christ, of which the gospel speaks, an everlasting kingdom, a kingdom of life, salvation, and righteousness. And all those who believe shall enter into it from out of the prison of sin and death. So Luther takes the promise of the seed from Genesis 3:15 to Abraham. He skips Isaac, Jacob, Judah, all the way to David, 2 Samuel 7, these three major promises of the seed. And he says, look, this is the promise of the gospel. He continues, there are many more such promises of the gospel in the other prophets also. For example, in Micah 5:2, and thou, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though thou art small in comparison with the thousands of Judah, out of thee shall come for me him who is the Lord in Israel. And again in Hosea 13:14, I will redeem them from hell and rescue them from death. Death I will be to thee a poison. Hell I will be to thee a pestilence. The gospel then is nothing but the preaching about Christ, the Son of God and of David, true God and man, who by his death and resurrection has overcome all men's sins and death and hell for us who believe in him. That's just fantastic. So there's Luther in his introduction to the New Testament, running through the gospel in the Old Testament from his prefaces to the books of the Bible. All right, see you later.